Tim is an example of how successful every single one of us as Wooten graduates can be. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Hwang.
Wow, what an introduction. Dr. Dorn, faculty, family, friends in the class of 2015, thank you for this incredible opportunity to join you today as you celebrate your graduation day. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be standing here before all of you. And class of 2015, you've made it. Congratulations. Exactly 5 years ago, I was here in this building, walking across this very stage to graduate and receive my diploma as a graduate of the Wooten class of 2010. Now, many of you may know me as the guy that took 22 APs, or the SMOB. But for those of you that don't know me personally, you may know my motivations for pushing my boundaries to seemingly insane limits. When my counselors told me that I couldn't take more than one AP my freshman year, I self-studied too. When I heard from my parents that it was incredibly hard for Asian Americans to break into politics, that I should just go into traditional paths like law, finance, or medicine, I joined the Obama campaign. And when I heard that there had never been a Wooten student in history who had been elected to the Board of Education, I decided to run, and won. Now, deep down in my roots, I needed to prove that I wasn't going to be just another cog in the school system, that I as an individual was larger than the conformity that our systems and norms demanded. The lesson that I learned very early on was that the world is a surprisingly malleable place. Just because someone tells you you can't do something doesn't mean you can't do it. Nothing is permanent. There are always ways to cause change. Once you realize that all processes, systems, and structures that the world has set up for you are artificially created, you can be the exception to these rules. Now, after you graduate and enter college, you'll find that there will be a surprisingly large number of people who will get in the way of what you want. This becomes even more common once you enter the working world. The seemingly small, everyday ways which you choose to deal with people telling you no will define the color of your life. When I decided to start Fiscal Note with two of my friends from Wooten, Gerald and Jonathan, everyone said we were crazy. Even at places like Princeton and Harvard, the vast majority of people were entering finance, consulting, tech, or law after graduation. The dirty secret is that everyone is too afraid to take on the risk and do something about it. Somewhere along the line, between marching from period to period in high school and ending up at a big conglomerate 20 years later, people simply learn to accept the predetermined pathways as unchangeable. You go to school because that's what you're supposed to do. You take this job because that's what you're supposed to do. You take out a loan and buy this house and car because that's what you're supposed to do. You give up, and you yourself become the biggest voice in saying no to your dreams. Now, as a startup founder, the question I get most often is, how did you do it at such a young age? The reality is that just because I'm in my early 20s doesn't mean the challenges I face as a CEO are any easier. Now, in the early days, we struggled not only with the constant barrage of rejections we got from candidates, investors, advisors, bankers, and customers, but from doubts we had about ourselves and our ability to build a company from the ground up. After all, how could 3 college kids take on Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, massive multi-billion-dollar companies with tens of thousands of employees? One of the most vivid memories I had of the depths by which we were pushed was when we were out raising our second round of capital. The day before we were supposed to sign a multi-million-dollar cash infusion into our company, we broke the deal off. Now, with 6 weeks of cash left in the bank to survive, I called all of our employees into our office kitchen and delivered the bad news. One by one, our employees voluntarily gave up their salaries for 2 months, giving me enough time to fly out to San Francisco and try and pull an investment deal together. I remember flying out to SF, jumping in a rental car, and in that airport parking lot, breaking down and crying. I was 21 at the time, and to put your entire reputation, time, money, and effort into something and come out staring death, failure, and humiliation for you and all of your employees is about as bad as it gets. But we did it. We ended up closing that round and 2 more on top of that. In the last 2 years, we've partnered with brilliant billionaires like Mark Cuban, Jerry Yang, Steve Case, and NEA, the largest venture capital firm in the world, raised over $20 million, hired hundreds of world-class employees, and are giving some of the best tech companies in the world a run for their money. This year alone, we'll grow by 400%. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. If one door shuts, you open another. If every door shuts, you build your own door and walk through it, no matter what. Your parents and teachers will never tell you this, but you, sitting in this room, are probably some of the most powerful people that have ever walked on the face of the planet. You're able to access the world's information in a device that fits in your pocket. You can send a device and a message that can traverse the entire world in less than half a second. You can see and converse in real time with another person living halfway across the world. And powerful algorithms and artificial intelligence are capable of conversing with you and predicting the future. These are things that only a generation ago were impossible. Meanwhile, the generation that you and I are a part of is perfectly capable of living in this world. We're a generation that went through 9/11, the Great Recession, and the rapid penetration of mobile technologies and more. It's a world that we know and are comfortable with, a world where change is the only norm. And so it falls on us. In our generation, most of us will get to work in a car driven by itself. Mapping our genome, being able to predict the future health risks to our body will be cheaper than getting a burrito and guac at Chipotle. And new technologies and batteries and energy will help us remove CO2 and save the planet. In the face of all this change, we have the responsibility to challenge every existing status quo and prove, more than any other generation in American history, that the world is a malleable place at our hands and our ideas. This is a big step for all of you, but this is just the beginning. I encourage you to be relentless, to be exceptional, and to challenge everything. Congratulations again, class of 2015.